in the country relative to other cities in how much public art exists and how much free art exists. I think that's the critical um, point here. It's not associated with luxury, or anyone can come and see it. And I think that is something I've grown up around, and that ethos is something that I've always believed in. So, I mean, I'm hoping that there will be this shift where other people recognize how important it is.
I think art is a form of expression for an artist. It is so personal, it's inspiring, thought provoking. It's like a language in itself that can be interpreted in so many different ways, and I believe can change lives. I am so in awe of all the artists that I have chatted with in this series, and I have personally learned and gained so much from each conversation. And I hope you do the same. So happy listening. Hi everyone. Today I'm in conversation with Aashti Miller. Aashti is a super talented architect, and she also says that she's an architect by day, but an illustrator by night. And she's also the sole force behind Miller Inc., which is a graphic design and illustration studio. So thank you so much for joining me, Aashti. I do appreciate, the fact that you've just come back from a trip. And as you were saying to me before the conversation started, it was a kind of crazy trip. So, but thank you anyways for chatting with me. So, where should we begin?
Well, thanks for having me, Payal. It's really, I mean, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it'll be great.
Super. So a little bit about you, Aashti. I know a little bit about your background. I mean, I know that you're talking to me from Mumbai, and
Yep.
I'm assuming that's home for you. But just a little background to you would be interesting.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Mumbai, and I live here right now. I spent 5 years in the US studying architecture at Cornell University, after which I worked in the US for a couple of years. And while I was working there, this sort of my interest in illustration really peaked. Even when I was in college, all of my architectural work was sort of, treading this line between architecture and illustration. And that always interested me, this gray area that exists between both the fields. So I started participating a lot in open architecture competitions, just, putting my drawings out there. And all of my weekends were spent, just kind of tinkering on these very, very detailed drawings. And then I decided to come back. I till date, I'm continuing my job with the same company that I was working with in the US, but just as like a hedge, I said, oh, let me just, start drawing a little bit more and putting it out there on social media, and we'll see where it goes. It was just sort of something to keep me accountable to myself, to keep drawing. And being back in Mumbai and, in the art scene that exists in the city, I was very inspired to do that. And then it just kind of started there. And I mean, moral of the story is always put your work out there, and you'll be surprised with the end results, because that's kind of what happened, just don't.
That's amazing. That was like a turning point for you. So obviously it was a calling which which needed some kind of an outlet, and you got inspired when you came back to Mumbai. And yes, I do understand that the art in scene, as you put it, is very, very vibrant, and there's a lot of talent in the city. So, excuse me. So, as an illustrator, what do you focus on?
So essentially, my illustrations have kind of really evolved with time. And, I was always asked this question of like, oh, what's your primary focus? Like, what's your style? And I could never quite answer it. I think after a lot of time and, looking at my original work and how it's evolved into what it is today, I think my focus is really bringing this sort of architectural sensibility in a way to the illustrations. They come across as very fluid, very playful, which is not necessarily what one thinks of when they think of architectural representation. But the software that I use to even draw these illustrations is architecture software. So there's this sense of like line and form and composition that is very heavily informed by, my profession, my everyday life, what I've studied and, worked at for many years. So I think that in a way, that's my style and that's my focus, to really try to blend these two fields. I find that, they're so similar, but still somehow they're kept so separate. So I kind of like this, as I said, this gray area for me, that's my interest.
Okay, so when did art really become a part of your life?
So my mom's an artist actually. And my dad's an architect. So I grew up very much surrounded by these two things. My mom, when she was raising my sister and I, she used to work from home. So our house was, her studio. It was, for me, at least as a kid, seeing her painting every day in the oddest of places, because I think, she was one of those, she was a great, example of a working mom, like,
Yeah.
baby in one hand, like paintbrush in the other kind of vibe. So, how she kind of adapted my home space into her art space for me was something that was just as an environment, it just created something so inspiring and interesting for me. And now I work from home because I work remotely and everything. So I always think of that, that's the
Yeah,
image
so
that's
you think so that's that would be your early influence, right?
definitely,
Just being
definitely.
surrounded by art, and I'm aware of how talented your mom is. I've seen a lot of her art, and I know her personally as well. So, yeah, so I can understand how that would have influenced you. Just seeing so much art around you. So, did you ever dabble in like art uh, as in painting, or has
So I get asked this question a lot about, if I'm a painter, obviously because of my mom's influence. And oddly enough, my sister, she's an architect, but she's the painter. And I feel like uh, there's something about, so how do I put this? So whenever we're asked, I say, no, I'm the drawer and she's the painter. I
painter?
think
Okay,
that's,
got
that's
it.
there's a distinction between those two. And like, even when I'm painting murals, I get asked this question like, oh, you must be a painter, right? I'm like, no, no, no. Like, even when I'm painting, I'm bringing it's, everything is calculated, everything is very calibrated, because I think there's a certain free, and that's why even when people ask me if I'm an artist, I always say no. I always I think of myself more as an illustrator, and I think the
Illustrator.
difference for me is the fact how I approach artwork or illustrations. I'll stay away from the word artwork. Is how an architect does. So for me, that's not fluid. It's not this, crazy, wild, abstract thing. Everything that I do comes with structure. Um, but it's interesting, while I say that, I'm not one of those people who like sketches and researches and kind of plans, but somewhere in my mind, I need structure in my own way, in
Yeah.
my own weird, unique way to make
So,
that happen.
when you're illustrating, I understand that your influence is completely architecture, but where do you get the inspiration from? Is it, what's your process?
So my process is a strange one. I always get asked this, and whenever I do, like interviews or anything, people are like, "Oh, show us your early sketches." And if you look at my sketchbook, it's completely blank. There's a bunch of notes in there, but that's about it. So it's a very mental process for me. I think about it a whole lot before I actually start. So, when I receive a brief, I'm constantly just, thinking through ways of doing it. And for me, the process is, it's very tough for me to describe it because it's one of those things I just start and, it keeps building. So I start with one small thing, something that just stands out to me, like if there's a list of things, the first thing that really sticks out to me, I'll just start with that and just build out from there. It's a little bit like, I mean, I think the reason why I always come back to architecture is because like how architects build plans, right? It's done through a sketch, but you start with one place and kind of build out from there. There's a starting point, and then you kind of, once you finish the whole thing, you work backwards. You go back
Yeah,
inwards and
yeah.
revise. So that's kind of how I go. It's a very non-glamorous.
So what in India from like a long time ago, people would artists would paint posters like movie posters, and it could be on a wall, or it could be on a like a billboard, but a painted one. um, has that changed? Are they being more because they're artists and they truly are artists, right? But I think they were never really given that kind of they were not credited as
Mhm.
artists, and they were probably just struggling and trying to make two ends meet. So, do you think that there is a lot more awareness in India now? Because you do see a lot of murals in cities like Mumbai and Delhi, and from whatever I have read and heard. So, is that something which has evolved over the years? Are these artists being given, you know, um, proper credit? Um, are they being paid better for what they're doing?
So, I mean, I completely agree. I think as a country, we have such a rich history of, informal art, like signboard painting, movie posters, as you mentioned, the back of trucks. Everyone's familiar with the Horn Okay Please and all the graphics associated with it. And I think it's for me that has always been a source of inspiration because it's the perfect melding in a way of two completely different fields, which is illustration and graphic design, in this sort of architectural realm because it's out there for people to see, like it's so public. Uh, I think this, what you speak about when you say the mural, the visibility of murals and the existence of murals, I actually think that's fairly new. Uh, you go to other countries and mural painting is so it's proliferated everywhere, and I think we're at a very exciting time in our country where it's just kind of taking off. Like it's probably about 200 300 murals here, which is not a lot when you think about it. And there's so much of an interest in it now because almost behind the times, that it's an exciting space to be in because you're at this, it's like the first person to use
Pioneering,
social
yeah,
media. Yeah, exactly. It's like the first
yeah.
person who discovered like Instagram or something like that. You're at the start of something completely new and exciting, and there's so much room for it and there's so much interest in it, and our public spaces could use it so much that as I said, exciting space to be in. I think it's still growing, and like all things that grow, it's going to take some time for it to monetarily be recognized for what it is. Like I've had murals of mine painted in other countries, and that's, people see it for as an opportunity to market. They see it as an opportunity, like offices like putting it in their spaces, and in that sense, those artists earn a lot of money and their work is out there in that public space. I think right now it's still a very much a in our country, it's a public good. You're kind of doing it for the good of the country, which is always great, but I am hoping that soon enough,
Yeah,
there's
because I think, the artists, their work should be recognized, not just visually, but
yeah,
also, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone needs to live and survive, right?
yeah,
So, yeah, no, that's interesting, and I hope that artists. There's such a large community of extremely talented artists who are established,
yeah,
and if they can collectively make that effort, and encourage unknown artists to or mural artists, or
yeah,
whatever the terminology is. I think it will definitely bring about a change, one in beautification, and two in helping the artists to develop and to grow and to be financially independent. So yeah,
yeah,
so I mean, I'm happy to hear that there is a movement.
yeah, it's definitely
So
happening. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's good. So do you think, I know you're an illustrator, but somewhere do you think that art has the ability to transform lives
I've always
and also kind of, bring about social change?
I've always thought that personally, and maybe it's because I mean, Mumbai has so many, art festivals and things, and we're quite well placed in the country relative to other cities in how much public art exists and how much free art exists. I think that's the critical point here. It's not, associated with luxury, or anyone can come and see it, and I think that is something I've grown up around, and that ethos is something that I've always believed in. um so I mean, I'm hoping that there will be this shift where other people recognize how important it is to society. Obviously, it's a feel good thing at the most basic level. You look at it, you feel good, but there's also this inherent pride that you feel and a sense of belonging, I think, when you see art that you identify with. And when I was painting with Start India and the Goethe Institute in Chennai, we were painting in Kannagi Nagar, which is basically one of the largest, if not the largest, resettlement community for the victims of the tsunami in Chennai. So what tends to happen is that, these people who live in these homes, it creates this public space automatically. You paint on a wall, it creates a place where people can gather, and that automatically, creating a public space where people flock to. It creates a sense of safety, a sense of community, obviously, but a sense of safety as well, safety in numbers kind of situation. But also the people who live in those homes, and their homes are these contested spaces because it's not where they thought they would be. It's not something that they necessarily feel a sense of belonging with, because it's associated with some sort of tragedy or move or displacement. So I think it creates like a sense of pride. You have something on your walls that belongs to you as much as it belongs to the artist, as much as it belongs to the organization who's paid for it. So I think there is so much room to create identity in a country that and that's why I said it's at the forefront of this mural movement. So the chance to create new identities that are interesting and haven't existed before, I think it's very exciting, and I think people are really tapping into that, which is good to see.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so it does, in your opinion as well, help in bringing about social change.
Definitely. Like
Yeah.
Sassoon Docks, for example, I just painted there again with Start India, and it's one of those I've lived in Mumbai my entire life, and I've never been to Sassoon Docks, which is crazy to me. It's such a fantastic little piece of history that has just been preserved almost, I mean, as perfectly as it can be, without any great attention or heritage attention, or very heavy preservation efforts. It's this little figment of history. And I find that, and obviously I painted there, so I was there all the time, but the types of crowds these places attract, I'm sure 85% of those people have never been to Sassoon Docks. So
Yeah.
not only like is it drawing attention to a place that really does need it, they need support, they need help in to ensure that they don't get completely, obliterated, because people are obviously like, you Google Sassoon Docks and everything, every article. This is one of the things when I was researching or looking into it and, trying to explore themes that I wanted to paint. Every single article talks about the redevelopment of Sassoon Docks. Like, oh, it should be this, it should be these high-rise buildings. Here are some conceptual renderings of the area. There is
And yeah,
nothing that
and if
talks
you
about
can just
something.
very quickly for a lot of people who don't know and
Yeah.
who are not aware of Sassoon Docks, if you could just very quickly describe what Sassoon Docks really
Sure, sure.
is. Yeah.
So, Sassoon Docks in Mumbai is like a historical dock. It was one of the most successful ports during the British colonial era of India. It's also not alone. The entire eastern edge of the city, in fact, is made up of, I think, about 13 to 14. The numbers are vague. Like an entire, it's a chain of docks that connect to one another, that form such a pivotal part of our development as a country. And now, obviously, the trade and things have changed. There are issues with the dock that have come up with modernization. Certain ships with the tide, it doesn't work. There's another port that's been created, across the water. So that's a little bit more suited to large scale commercial activities. So obviously, the docks are still heavily occupied. They're still used a lot for fishing populations, but they're, considered more underprivileged, or so a lot of the structures have fallen into disrepair. There's people are trying to take it over. The development of the city is crazy at this point. The fight for space is something we've always had, but it's never been quite as intense as it is right now. So that kind of land is just, prized by people. But
so you think that this particular festival has actually got a lot of people who would normally not step into Sassoon Docks to actually come and see what it is. So in that sense, again, art has been instrumental in actually bringing out the plight of Sassoon Docks and the community of fishermen, women who live there, right? So,
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting. I think a lot more of this needs to happen. And art clearly has a huge influence in bringing about change. I personally believe in it as well. So, did you kind of confirm that for me? So, before, signing off, just very quickly, does your art, your illustrations, to be more specific,
you can use either word, I don't mind.
Does it in any way represent something about you personally?
It's a very tough question for me personally, because I think I try to keep myself as out of it as I can. And I also think that's why, I know I've played up this distinction between artist and illustrator.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do it is, I think, because I make a conscious choice to keep myself out of it in as much as I can. I don't think anyone can fully do that, but I think illustrators to some extent can. I think the murals are where that really, that's really changed for me, because it's not only, obviously, there's elements of every person and every design, but murals are so hands-on, and they're literally a labor. Like, I feel like they're a labor of my love. Like, I look at them and I feel like they're my child, it's that kind of attachment to those. And it's one of the only things I think I've ever worked on in my life. I'm not even, since my childhood, that I've looked at, and I've truly felt the sense of awe every time I've gone back. So I think if someone wants to see a piece of me, definitely take a look at any of the murals I've done. But I can't tell, unfortunately, I can't tell you what it is. Like, it's just like,
it's just something which,
it's just something from inside
and
me that's on there that I can see when I look at it, and like people who know me can see it. So it must be there, because
I'm sure it is. Yeah. While I was researching you, clearly I saw the talent that you have, and you definitely, now that you've found a different way of expression through murals, which is something that you haven't done in the past. I think that's great.
Thank you so much. Your questions were really insightful. I always like answering questions that make me think about myself and how I'm thinking.
You take care, and
thank you.
And good luck. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
For more weekly conversations, do listen to Melting Pot on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Podcast Melting Pot. So until the next episode, this is Payal signing off.